common market for Eastern Southern Africa is the largest trading as well as political bloc here in Africa, with a population of almost 780 million people and an economy the size of $1.1 trillion US. The last 30 years has seen phenomenal growth within the bloc. And the question is, what is going to happen in the next 30 years? Joining us on Inside Government, we are talking to the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Trade, Investment and Industry, Honorable Lee Kinyanjui. Our conversation is the past of COMESA, the present as well as the future of COMESA. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Bwana Waziri. How is COMESA important to Kenya?
Thank you. Kenya is a member of the East African community with about 300 million people. So when you get to the COMESA space, that number more than doubles. So for any country that is thinking of producing, creating markets, a bigger market means a bigger opportunity, a bigger engagement at a different level. So COMESA is very important to Kenya, and also to note that logistically, because of Mombasa, we are also the connecting hub. So most of the countries within the Eastern and Southern Africa, whether you're thinking of Egypt bringing their commodity to any country, Mombasa also becomes a critical turning point. So I would say that our fortunes, both now and in the future, lie on how well we can utilize our COMESA market.
When you look at where Kenya is positioned, it was one of the founding members of COMESA which succeeded the preferential trade agreement. And when you look at our trade with COMESA, it's less than 40%. Do we have room to grow this? If yes, to what margins and by when?
I think some of the challenges we have faced in the past with respect to growth have had to do with the internalization that regional trade is the way to go. And I'm saying this because within the entire Africa, the intra-Africa trade stands at 17%. If you compare this with the European Union, for example, at 70%, then you realize they are over 3.5 times higher than where we are. So given the global trade turbulence today, where you have war in Ukraine, in the Middle East, you also have tariff wars, what it simply means is that countries need to look more inwardly for their solutions. And I think for countries within the COMESA, the opportunity of Zambia maize being bought by Kenya as opposed to us going to Brazil, for example, the issue of our meat being sold in Egypt instead of them buying from maybe Colombia and other countries in the South America, that's really the conversation we need to have. And I am happy that even if you look at the number of delegates who've been here and the issues that they are raising, there is a realization that this is where to go. And more importantly for Kenya, President William Ruto will be assuming the chairperson of COMESA. So again, this will offer a huge working platform for Kenya, but also for the broader COMESA. And therefore, Kenya will be playing a lead role at a time of great trade turbulence across the world.
And when you look at Africa, I mean, there is a lot of what we call trade compartmentalization. You have SADC in the south, you have the EAC in the west, the east. Then you have the, what do we call it, ECOWAS in West Africa. And all these regions, they are all looking at improving trade within themselves. And so, how then do you bring together on the table all these trading blocs to ensure that you drive the growth of intra-regional growth, trade?
I think the first thing is the success of every trading bloc, say the EAC, and the success of SADC and many others become the building blocks of the bigger trade position that we would want to have. So the success of EAC, the success of COMESA, the success of SADC or ECOWAS, is all these trading blocks that finally come together to do the Africa Free Trade Area sort of a conversation. So it's not necessarily a contradiction because you can't connect the whole of Africa overnight. But it's easier to connect it in bits. East Africa, we are connected. This one, you're connected. If you look at COMESA, it's really 21 countries, so just about half of the entire continent. So they're not necessarily in contradiction. I think they are complementary. Secondly, the issue of how we can support growth in trade, I think we need to look at key obstacles. I think the first obstacle is infrastructure. If you want to sell commodity from here to, say, Kinshasa, for example, or from here to Zimbabwe or in some of these other places, the biggest problem you will face is connectivity. Connectivity at the road level, at the air level, and also by rail. So if you look at air as a starting point, if you want to travel to countries in parts of Africa, more often than not, you travel out of the continent, say to Dubai, then you come back to where you want to go. If you want to go to Algiers, we don't have direct flights, western parts of Africa and so many other places. So we are not connected. So Kenya, for example, our biggest export is fresh produce. We sell flowers. So if you don't have direct air connectivity, then the volume goes down. The other issue is rail. Rail is the cheapest and most reliable form of transport. But how is our rail connection within the COMESA region? I would say it is very low. So again, when you want to transport commodities from one point to the other, you will face reliability issues, cost, and so on. But I'm happy to note that Kenya has already made a significant step. If you look at the SGR from Mombasa to Naivasha, with every plan currently being made to connect Naivasha all the way to Uganda, and that means if you're able to take it to Uganda and finally to Burundi and so on, then it means a cargo can leave the DRC to Mombasa by train. These are the trade obstacles that we would want to see resolved. We also have issues to do with shipping lines, companies that specialize in sea transport. Again, if you want to send your cargo from Mombasa to maybe to the northern or western part of the country, we don't have dedicated lines that do the African route. So more often than not, your cargo will first go to India, then finally go to Namibia, and so on. So we are having serious challenges around how we can connect. And I think part of the conversations we are trying to encourage also is having shipping lines that are dedicated to the African continent, and also creating hubs where cargo from the west can come from the east, and from there we can be able to distribute it across the entire place. So these are some of the challenges, cross-border challenges. The issue of how long it takes to cross a border, the efficiency becomes also important, because you don't want to be in a situation where you have 3 borders to cross and each are taking 5 hours. Then it means nearly a day is completely wasted in unnecessary bureaucracy. So conversations around how we can make our borders seamless, how we can digitize our borders, how we can privatize what needs to be privatized. I think these are all discussions that we need to work on. Then lastly is cold store, because when you're talking about movement of goods, not all goods are fresh, so we need to appreciate that we may be transporting milk or fish or any other type of meat or flowers or vegetables. So if you're taking your vegetables from one country to the other, how is our cold store chain from the airport to the port to the border place and so on? And now these are all what you call enablers. Once we get the enablers right, once we get the political goodwill, which I think is there, we will be in a good place. And I'm sure the days to come look much better than probably in the past. And the world also is realizing that every country now must look inwardly, or rather like at its national interests. So COMESA is part of African interests from a trade perspective.
And you're talking about infrastructure development, and when you look at COMESA, you know, we're having a funding gap of more than $700 billion US annually when it comes to investment in infrastructure. And the countries are struggling, you know, to fund infrastructure development in their specific countries. What do we need to do so that we ensure that we raise internal resources to invest in infrastructure?
The availability of minerals, which is one of the key attractions for most of the big Western nations that want to come to Africa, is important in answering that question, because if you look at the value of minerals across Africa, including Kenya, it is enough, and we can leverage that to create the necessary infrastructure. DRC, Burundi, all these countries have huge reserves, but they remain largely unutilized, and even when they are utilized, maybe not optimally. So I'm saying every part of the COMESA, there's something we can leverage. And as these companies come to mine and whatever, we can also have contracts that can go alongside that.
But do they have technologies to exploit the natural resources that they have?
Partnerships. I think the world over, partnerships is what is working. You may have the minerals, but you may not have the technology or the know-how or the market. So I think looking for the right partners who have an interest in your country, but I think also it's good to emphasize that even as you look for partners, we want also look for partners, but ensure that the agreements upon which we enter take care of the national interest of every country, so that you don't get loop-sided agreements that end up punishing the citizens of those respective countries. But it is possible to leverage the minerals and create infrastructure for the continent.
You see, when you look at 30 years since COMESA was formed, I mean, you know, the world geopolitics have really changed. And now we are living in a multipolar world. And Africa has become the playground for big powers, where now they are coming back to exploit our natural resources, from lithium to cobalt to steel to all these. And the question that is coming out is, then how does COMESA then position African countries within COMESA, position themselves not to become just a mining ground, but also to become exporters of mining and finished products?
Yeah, I think what's happening today is arising from many things, from post-COVID to all the wars that we've had across the world. There's been a slowdown in economic growth. So as a result of that, every country now is focused on how we can increase the economic well-being of each country. And part of that answer lies in value addition. So instead of selling raw materials, can we make the batteries and sell it as battery? But part and much of this answer lies on partnerships. Getting companies that are ready to build the technology, give the orders for these batteries, partnering with big companies where the vehicles are manufactured and so on. So I think the issue of pairing our minerals and our wealth with companies that can be able to exploit them in other countries remains key. But we are saying that even in the basic theory of 30 or 40%, we still have enough to run. But I think the point is, as long as the minerals are beneath us and they are not being exploited, they are not of value to us, and they cannot change the fortunes of our countries.
Now we have the African Free Trade Area Agreement that has come into force. Do we still need regional blocks?
Regional blocks are the building blocks of the continental trade area. So the successes, for example, Within East Africa, one of the things we are trying to do is free movement of people and goods, creating networks.
And we're having a challenge with that.
Yeah, we're having a challenge, but we're trying to solve that. But the point is, the efficiencies we create around one block, if the other one also creates similar efficiencies, together we have a super sort of platform upon which all the others can lie. So yes, there are challenges, but our view is that focus should not be on the challenge, but on the benefits that come when you overcome the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You talked about regional conflicts pitting neighbors, and we have seen these even Kenya and Tanzania, where Tanzania unilaterally declares its boundaries, closed for Kenyan businesses. You have the same thing happening between Rwanda and Congo, Burundi and Rwanda. Is it possible to have harmonious COMESA where countries are trading with each other and there are proper conflict dealing mechanisms in place?
I think for every trading bloc, there's bound to be issues from time to time. What is important is, do we have a mechanism of solving those problems as and when they come? And how soon and how effective is that machinery? Once we have it and it is working, then it ceases to be an issue. Just for purpose of the Kenya-Tanzania issue, we did release a statement and also a petition to the Tanzanian government to review their position when there was a statement around the banning of Kenyans from doing businesses at certain categories. And last week, we also sent a delegation that had a very fruitful engagement with them, and we think the matter is almost solved. So I think the mechanisms we put and the efforts become very important in resolving the issues around any trading bloc. Maybe in the interim, what we would want to say is that political will is what is important. Once we get the political will, almost any other problem can be solved. And also encouraging citizens within these countries to see each other as people or persons having similar problems and therefore need to be united in solving those problems, as opposed to perceiving that the reason I don't have a job is because there's a Kenyan who has come to take my job, or Rwandese. But that when the plate is bigger, everybody gets a share. And I think this is really the conversation we want. We are also looking at the different abilities of all these countries. For example, Kenya has a very strong tech working group. So in terms of supporting the technology and innovation within the region, within COMESA, and even beyond Africa, Kenya can play a very big role. And I think what we need to do is to encourage areas of hospitality, hotels, and so on. Kenya has a very strong background, and you'll find that hotels in countries, including Dubai and many other places across the continent, Kenyans are running those hotels. Why? Not because they come from Kenya, but because of competence. So likewise, you'll find other countries may have unique skills that we do not have. So I think it's just a question of mapping and realizing what gaps you have, how you can be able to meet them. And you are saying, before you go far to look for solutions, can you look within your region, within COMESA, within the EAC, before we can go far?
We're also living in an era where, big powers are putting their countries and the interests of their nations first. We have seen the U.S. president with America First policy. We're also seeing China with its own policies of deepening its own economy. Is this likely to disrupt the way COMESA is architectured and the future of COMESA?
I think at the global level, we have two major arguments that are taking root. The first argument is with respect to multilateralism. Multilateralism is a belief that we can solve our problems together. That's why we are in the UN together, we are in the Food and Agricultural Organization together, we are in UNESCO. Those are instruments of multilateralism. There is also another school of thought that believes that countries can solve their problems on their own. So it's Kenya, Uganda, Kenya, US, Kenya, Britain. And in so doing, they are saying that's why such policies, you can see them, because they seem to put the belief in the individual countries as opposed to block of countries. So I think these are areas we need to look at. But I think Kenya believes and respects the international community, the UN, the African Union. These are multilateral institutions because in the past they have also been very critical in solving some of the global challenges that we have. So I think those are the broad conversations that we are having. None is entirely right or wrong, but there are situations where each country will have to look at its own interests. And that's why we're saying COMESA first, EAC first, Kenya first, and that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. So situations may demand that, but overall, we are better together working in like-minded groups. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're bringing in the issue of global geopolitics, and you're right. I mean, you know, the jury is still out on whether to go multipolar or unipolar world. But when you look at COMESA, the issues of currency volatility, as well as currency denominations, you have about 21 countries that are using different currencies to trade. And this is a challenge, because if somebody wants to go and do business if a Kenyan wants to go and trade in Zimbabwe, for example, when they get there, they must buy Zimbabwean dollar. There has been a lot of conversation about coming up with a common currency for COMESA. Is that idea being entertained at the highest level?
I think the issue of different currencies is important, but it is not unique to Africa. It's the same case in much of the rest of the world, except in areas like the European Union where they have a common currency of the euro. But much of the other places, each country will have its own currency. And so what challenges have we faced? I think the first one is availability of currency. So you go to many places and you are selling your cargo in, say, USD, and there's shortage. I think that conversation around the shortage has been there for long, and that therefore hampers. And what we have tried to do is to find a way of African countries selling to each other in local currencies. So Kenya can sell to Ethiopia, each using its local currency without having to look for other currencies. It's already working. We just need to popularize it more. Secondly is encouraging...
Where you have trade being done between, with Kenya shillings and the Ethiopian birr.
Equivalent,
mm-hmm.
Yes. So if you want to sell a commodity to an African country, you don't have to ask them to pay you in USD for that matter. They can pay you in local currencies. You agree the equivalent. The second one is that we are...
Definitely know the US is having a lot of challenge with this. What are you calling the de-dollarization?
It's a settlement issue. We are not talking of one currency is bad or good. No, we're just trying to say if two countries are trading and there's currency challenges, because that's really part of what has brought us where we are. There's no problem with Kenya and Egypt trading in local currencies. Mm-hmm. The other issue is encouraging banks that have a regional reach. I am happy, as you know, we have banks in Kenya that are now in DRC. Some are in Ethiopia, in Sudan, in Uganda, Tanzania. You even have one of our local banks now opening even in Dubai. So the more you have local banks becoming regional, continental, intercontinental, the more also we are able to make payments easy. Because it means you can walk to your bank, you have a Kenya shilling account, a Uganda shilling account, and you can be able to convert that with ease. So yes, there's been a challenge, but a lot is being done to resolve this matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you look at COMESA, it's a bloc that is made of 21 countries in a continent where you have 54 member states. Is there still room for more?
Absolutely. Actually, our responsibility is to try and get more countries to sign into it.
Why are they not signing into COMESA?
The more, the merrier. The more, the better for us. So I don't think we would want to see a COMESA that's an exclusive club for few people, few countries. I think COMESA is open, and we believe that everybody in every country has a role and a responsibility to play within the COMESA.
From the 7th to 9th October 2025, the world turns to Nairobi as Kenya proudly hosts the 24th COMESA Summit of Heads of State and Government at the KICC, bringing together 21 member states, global partners, and business leaders. This year's theme is leveraging digitalization to deepen regional value chains for sustainable and inclusive growth. With a population of 682 million and a GDP of over $1 trillion, COMESA is Africa's largest regional economic bloc, shaping trade, innovation, peace, and prosperity. The COMESA Summit 2025, live from KICC Nairobi, only on KBC Channel 1.
The SIA International Trade and Investment Conference is taking place between 15th and 17th of October 2025. We want to take this opportunity to invite all delegates, both local and international, all business persons of all cadres. We are also honored to have His Excellency the President as our chief guest during that period. And we anticipate getting much more visibility and support from both local and international investors to come and support this conference.
Kiitikio cha kutambua sauti yako na huku tukisherehekea miaka 14 ya utangazaji bora wa stesheni ya KBC ya Kalenjin Kitwek FM. Tunakualika katika mbwembwe za aina yake kuanzia tarehe 10 hadi tarehe 12 mwezi huu. Kouni iko hivi: tarehe 10 tupatane Great Hope Children's Home kuanzia saa 8 ya udhuri. Tarehe 11 tupande miti, tusakate kandanda na kukata keki katika shule ya Masaba. Hatimaye tarehe 12 tuchumuike AIC Mosoriota kwa ibada ya shukrani kuanzia saa 4 asubuhi. Watangazaji wako wakali kama Mr. Wadis, Cheptab Chesirit, Musupa Chela, Kiptangus na Joan Bet watakuwepo. Je, wewe?
98.0 Kitwek FM, Kegosin.
Are you happy to see a COMESA that is made up of 54 countries?
That's the Africa Free Trade Area.
Can it happen?
Conversation. Absolutely, it can. I mean, I cannot for sure say it will happen tomorrow, but our desire is to have a continent where you go out of the continent to look for solutions because you cannot find within the entire continent. So the more we are connected, the more we have information on each other, digital trade, digital possibilities, that creates a platform where all that can be done.
Well, if you're just joining us, you're watching Inside the Government on KBC, then of course our conversation is around COMESA, the last 30 years, the challenges and the opportunities, and also looking ahead at COMESA in the next 30 years, what we need to do. This is Inside Government. A short break is well deserved, and then we are coming back with more conversation. You're watching Inside Government from Kenyatta International Convention Center, which is the venue of the 24th edition of the COMESA Head of Summit and High-Level Dialogue. We are joined by Cabinet Secretary for Trade, Investment and Industry, Lee Kinyanjui. Our conversation is around COMESA going forward. Before we went for the break, we were discussing how we can grow the number of membership in COMESA. And I was asking you, I mean, why is it that we are not having many countries signing in? Is there any magic in getting like 10, 20 countries to join in at the same time?
I think our biggest problem is not necessarily the number of countries, because even those who are there, the volume they have dedicated to the COMESA region is still low. So as we think of how to maybe include other countries, the point of what percentage of our trades are we channeling through COMESA also becomes very important. So you could have 20 countries, but they are doing what 3 countries could do in terms of trade. So the focus is not so much in the number of countries, but the volume of trade within the COMESA region. And I think part of our intended purpose of this summit is just that political realization that we need to trade more, we need to do more within the COMESA, and other African countries that have a surplus should be able to trade within each other, and basically unlocking all these small challenges that have been there historically. Yeah, so the issue is not so much adding members, which is a good idea, but also increasing trade within ourselves.
And you know, you also have a situation whereby, you know, some members of COMESA, you know, they belong to more than 2 regional blocks. For example, you have Tanzania belonging to EAC, COMESA, as well as SADC. And so this somehow, you know, creates a situation whereby they are more committed to one block over the other. Do you see that as a challenge?
Not entirely. It's probably not the most desired of situations, but it still happens. But now that it is there, I think the better focus would be on how we can mitigate that. But if there's a good value proposition in a trading block, people will tend to do more around that than outside. So there are challenges, obviously, because if any country, not particular to one, seems to be favoring one of this trading block over the other, it raises issues of loyalty within the greater trading block. But having said that, I still believe that it's not an obstacle, it's not a big issue, but it certainly requires caution when handling some of those issues, and also ensuring that there's clarity when it comes to managing affairs of the bloc.
Let's come back to the meeting that Kenya is hosting, the 24th edition of the Heads of Summits and High-Level Dialogue. What has happened so far in the last 3 days?
Our day one was actually a conversation around horticulture. And as you know, Kenya is a leading player in the horticulture space, both actually horticulture and flowers. We probably are doing about 40% of the cut flowers in Europe. And therefore, we felt that it was important to showcase what we are doing, because Kenya is also playing the role of mentoring and training other countries in this area of horticulture. So we had very good engagements. The European Union was present, and they have funded some of the programs that have also been used to propel the export for Kenya. So whether it's logistics, whether we are talking of technical issues, whether it's financing for horticulture, so the conversations revolved around that. Our chief guest was Mutai Kagwe, the CS for Agriculture. The second day, we were basically looking at the business forum because we reckon that after we have created an enabling environment, we've opened our borders, we've created the products and the standards, eventually it's the business people who will do the business. So if you don't empower the business people, if you don't connect the business people, then you will remain with papers in your hands with nothing to show. So again, the COMESA Business Forum, bringing together business people, business associations, like in Kenya, we had Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we had KFIs, we had all those players within the entire space, including KEPSAM, and their role was basically to come and contribute to the debate around how we can make this whole business work. And for people who are actually in business, the idea of B2B, connecting business people in Rwanda to those in Kenya, to those in the DRC and other places becomes very important. So that was our day 2. So day 3 was actually about foreign affairs. Our ministers of foreign affairs were meeting because international trade is also largely driven by foreign affairs in terms of your foreign trade, your foreign policy, and so on. So today was a meeting championing that space. And tomorrow is the final day, which is actually the heads of state. So all the resolutions made in these 3 will also find their way in the final summit. And the reason it is arranged that way is because political goodwill is very important. And when the heads of state endorse a position, then it becomes very easy to run with the entire program. So that's how it is aligned, and it will climax with the heads of state summit, which will also include a handover of the chairmanship of the COMESA from Burundi to Kenya.
From Burundi to Kenya. And so the question then comes, how then do you make the ordinary person in the street, in the farm, in the office, to become and to feel that they are part and parcel of COMESA business?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, this person you're saying, the common man. See, the digitization process has made everybody informed. You could be in a remote village, but you have access to information as much as a person in an urban center. So I think the area we really want to emphasize in the area of digitization. So information should be available so that a person in Malawi or Zambia or Kenya and any other place can access that information as much as possible. Media engagement also becomes very important. And I think finally through government, because governments have machineries all the way down, we also activated the entire government machinery to align our people for trade. And I think it's important to say that we're not just saying we want trade for the sake of trade. The endorsement of trade as a viable tool to fight poverty, create employment, is born out of the big unemployment challenge we have in Africa. If you look at the big immigration crisis we are having in parts of the world, in Europe and other places, a good number of those people actually come from Africa. Yep. Why? We are not creating enough jobs for our people. We are selling our products raw. We are selling them at low value. So how do we create that? How do we reorganize that? So that's where now COMESA comes in, where we create markets, where we complement each other in terms of abilities. And I think that way we can be able to create a better platform upon which we can fight poverty, create employment, bring stability, and enhance the economic growth of our regions.
And talking about jobs, I mean, we are seeing a situation whereby, countries in COMESA, within the COMESA region, are struggling with economic development, which is really impacting job opportunities. And when you look at unemployment rate within the COMESA region, you're talking about almost 14%. How do we suppress these numbers to ensure that we arrest brain drain, which is really affecting innovation as well as industrialization within the bloc?
I think we urgently need to look at our trade regime, because every time we buy a commodity 100% made from another place, you are literally exporting jobs. So if this suit was made in Kenya, if my shoe made in Kenya, the car driving is made in Kenya or COMESA for that matter, you create jobs around the region. And that's why the issue of poverty and markets are one and the same thing. Create markets, create jobs, create companies, and together we can be able to uplift each other. But at 14% intra-Africa trade, you know what it means. We are
It's
on very thin
small.
air.
It's very small.
Yeah.
And also when you talk about manufacturing base, I mean, it is still very small within the COMESA block. And you're looking at less than 10%. And we don't know of any continent or regional bloc that has ever developed without industrialization, without emboldening the manufacturing base. What do we need to do to improve on that area?
I think I can say for Kenya, we are working at 3 levels. One is availing finance, long-term finance, because when you want to support industry, they require long-term, low-cost finance, because unlike other lines of business where you start trading quickly, make your money, industry requires a bit of patience. Now, commercial banks don't have that kind of patience. If you go to your typical bank and borrow some money, they want you to pay from next month. So they cannot be, so that's one area. Second thing is in the offering plug and play kind of infrastructure. So you're aware that we have come up with special economic zones. We've also come up with KIPES. We have EPZs. And these are dedicated industrial centers.
And that is in Kenya?
In Kenya. So in the past, if you wanted to set up an industry in Kenya, you had to go buy land, do change of user, ensure there's a road there, there's power, there's water. But now government is coming and setting all that. All you come is pay rent, and tomorrow you can start manufacturing. So again, special economic zones are going to improve manufacturing. And I'm happy to note some of the African countries, including many of them in COMESA, Uganda, even Rwanda, they have already adopted that special economic zone approach. And that way, we can be able to accelerate the growth of manufacturing. Yeah.
Kenya is going to assume the leadership of COMESA. What are we going to do strategically to ensure that we move our interest forward as a country, and at the same time we drive the interest of COMESA forward?
I think it's just in strategic placements. We have also said categorically opening a market is one thing. Creating the products that can satisfy that market is another big issue. So we are trying to come up with product lines that we think would be of utmost benefit to us. And what that simply would mean, let's assume a certain country is importing edible oils. We can see whether that's an area we can plug in cement, steel. I think these are all products. So I think information flow is also one area where we're having a problem. Because one country may have one surplus while another one has a deficit. But because they are not talking, we lose the conversation. So again, availing information on areas where we can be able to cooperate. Yeah.
Where do you see COMESA in the next 30 years? And we are talking about 2054.
I see COMESA as a more formidable trading bloc in the next few years. I see COMESA as a respected economic player, not just solving economics issues, but also peace and security, because we have also realized that some of the challenges we've had in the region is with respect to peace and security. Whenever there's disruption of peace and security, then trade cannot happen. So even as we create the infrastructure for trade, we must also carry along with us the infrastructure for good governance and stability. So I have very high hopes for COMESA. But beyond the hopes, I also know we have to do a lot to make it happen. So we have a responsibility, and we are committed, especially on behalf of Kenya. I can assure you that Kenya believes in COMESA, and during our term as a chairperson of COMESA, working with the president, we will make sure that COMESA becomes a force to reckon.
And what do you see as a catalyst for growth within COMESA in the next 30 years?
I think the youth. If you look at the population structure in Kenya and in Africa in general, the youth could easily make your 40%, whereas if you go to other parts of the world, that number shrinks to a very small number. So we have an aging population in other parts of the world, and in Africa, you have a very huge youth population. So the working population is actually the youth. So we have the energy. So that energy is what we need to use and leverage so that we can solve our other problems. So that's our key strength in my view, the skills, the knowledge, and the population. Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to know from you before I let you go?
I think as I've said, we are committed to support the COMESA, but I would want to take this opportunity to challenge the business community, whether you are a businessman in Machakos, in Nakuru, Kisumu, wherever you are, that the world we are in today is opening up. Don't see your markets from just a few kilometers from where you stay. You could be producing in Kisumu and your market is in Kigali. You could be producing in Nairobi and your market is in Addis Ababa. So we want Kenyans to see the markets beyond where they are. And even as government creates opportunities, we want the business people, the farmers, the cooperatives, and even our big corporates like Safaricom that has now gone to Ethiopia, they are living the spirit of COMESA.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, you have been watching Inside Government, and our conversation has been revolving around COMESA at 30, the challenges that this trading bloc has faced in the past, how it is addressing them, and of course, how the next 30 years will look like. And of course, you have heard it from the Cabinet Secretary in charge of trade, investment, as well as industry, Lee Kinyanjui, that the future of COMESA is bright. But of course, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much indeed for watching Inside Government. Until next week. Bye for now.